This is our unconstitutional awakening program.
Liftoff will start in T-minus 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition.
Brought to you by K&E Consulting Redesigned.
Ahoy there, mateys. It's time to set sail on another episode of Unconstitutional Awakening, the podcast. I'm your host, Jim Bob Ovalshorts, and today with me for this special edition of A Sea of Thieves Part 2, I've got Bandit with me, Neptune with me, and Ox has joined us today. So this, we're going to dive into this second part of Piracy in this deep dive docu-series that we're doing. And this week's center focus is going to be Asian piracy. I know last week we started way back in 1400 BC, which, believe it or not, there's been sea peoples since then. And even along the lines of the same time frame in the early centuries of like the first and second century and stuff, due to the Han Dynasty falling, there was a lot of piracy going on in the Asian seas, whether it was Korean, Japanese, Chinese, but, we're just going to cover it in general today. So, you guys sit tight and buckle up, get ready to set sail on this awesome historical, awesome historical, informative little mini docu-series that we're working on. So before we get too far into it, I want to say thank you to everybody over there on BitChute, Rumble, Odyssey, and all the audio podcasts worldwide that are checking into this show and giving us all the love and support that we need. Like it's pretty awesome to have all these different folks finding reason to hang out with us on random evenings of the week. And I'm gonna go around the table real quick before we jump into our plugs and see how everyone's doing on this fine Sunday afternoon. How are you doing there, Bandit?
Outstanding.
Neptune, what you got for me today, buddy? How you doing?
Doing well, man. Not a whole lot. Just glad it's the weekend. Glad it's Sunday. Glad to just be taking it easy and hanging out.
And Ox, you're over here with us this week. I'm so glad to see you around a little bit more. I'm glad you're getting things situated on your end, so we can have you a little bit more. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing okay. 6 feet on the right side of the ground today, right?
That's right. And I know it's way early for you over there on the other side of the country from us. So I appreciate you getting up this early and having some fun with us today.
I'm glad I can.
Awesome. And you guys, the best way you can give us a little bit of help and love and support, of course, you can find us on most social medias. Over there on Facebook, we're under Captain Conspiracy and the Freedom Pirates. And you can find me and Neptune over there on TikTok. Neptune's floating around over there as the Carolina Commando. And of course, you guys know Jim Bob Ovalshorts. And the main place you can find all of us is right here on unconstitutionalawakening.com. We've got everything set up here from, little blog news things that we try to post up there to our podcast to UA Social. And you can even listen to the show directly on there. Find all these awesome, really cool links that I'm showing for those of you that are watching to get back to where you can watch us. And you can even scroll down right here and check out our sponsors and check out this right here. This link right here takes you to, will take you to our merch store, and you can get you some sweet Unconstitutional Awakening merch. We got all kinds of good stuff over there. And speaking of our sponsors, we got those great folks over there that have been that are Friends of Liberty. And, they're just trying to make a difference in the world by offering alternative sources to get things that help you out in your daily needs. like my buddy over there, Kirk Elliott at kirkelliottphd.com/JimBob/ Kirk is he's big into consulting things and helping you make good investments with your money, whether it be gold, silver, trusts, whatever you believe in investing in. And probably a good idea because the rate that everything's going, paper money is probably on the way out the door. I'm not for digital either, but having something good and physical in your pocket that could probably get you around would probably be a good idea. So y'all go on over there and hit Kirk up, see what he can do for you, man. He's a real good dude. Then we got Peachy Key Creations. She's over there making homemade candles, homemade soaps, and she's even an energy healer. And if you don't know too much about that, feel free to reach out to her and find out what she can do for you, man. There's all kinds of good stuff going on over there, including a pirate themed soap to go along with the show. So you guys make sure you get over there and check that out. That's Peachy Key Creations. She's over there on Facebook. And then my little buddy making camping first aid and survival stuff, as well as plate carriers and ghillie suits, Ammo Can Survival. He's over there on Instagram, man. He's a real good young dude with a bright future. And I really feel, I'd feel honored if you guys would support this guy in his venture of trying to make people safer and smarter on a day-to-day basis. And then lastly, my buddy over there, Brett Pike at classicallearner.com with Homeschools Connected and the Cubs to Bears books. He's this Homeschools Connected. Is like a private homeschool community, and he's bringing all kinds of things to help you raise your kids outside of the indoctrination system, whether it be curriculums that set up different things daily on how to do things, to his Cubs to Bears books, which give you an overview of history that you can help teach to your children so that they're learning proper things about history instead of the propaganda they're fed. So, I appreciate all you guys, and I appreciate all the folks that support our Friends of Liberty. And I appreciate everybody that supports this show. As we mentioned in the 100th episode just the other day, we are well over 10,000 views and listens and stuff like that. And I think that's pretty amazing, because who'd have thought that some random weirdo with a pirate hat would have made it this far? So on this episode, though, of course, we're about to jump into part 2 of our piracy deep dive. And I guess the best way to start that off is to make note that piracy itself has been in paperwork, documented and stuff since like 1400 BC. And that was over in the Mediterranean area and stuff like that. But when you get over there into Asia during the Han Dynasty and the fall of it and stuff, there's many stories of Asian pirates, just, being brutal. Like they were definitely one of the more brutal sets of pirates that are out there, that were no hold bars and wanted to come out on top.
And the one thing is like I don't understand why this hasn't been brought mainstream like the golden era. The Asian piracy or the Mediterranean piracy, anything really BC pirate related. It was never. And if they wanted to make like amazing like pirate movies, they really should have gone BC. They really should have gone BC era. The whole golden age has been done since, forever. That's all anytime anybody thinks of a pirate, they automatically think of the Jolly Roger. Sure. They don't realize it goes back 10,000 years before that. 10,000. It really does. 10,000.
As we were discussing, you guys, it may very well be the second oldest documented profession.
Next to prostitution.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the so the Asian pirates after the Han Dynasty fell down in like the islands of Southeast Asia, the coasts of Japan and Korea and even the Philippines, were full of sea peoples that were a part of slave trades, as well as, just stealing things from, European, Arabic, and even Chinese, like boats that were supplying things and stuff out there, and traders and stuff like that. And so a lot of pirates were used in slave trades and stuff like that because, I guess some of these higher up crown type groups didn't want to have their name all over these things. So you would have Chinese, Japanese, Korean pirates out there, during what they called pirate season, because there's monsoons and stuff out there. And they would get out there and like just be hitting these groups hard, whether it be a slave ship or a trade ship or a spice ship or something like that, and just taking everything that they had. Like they were some of the most notorious like pirates there was. Like they when I say they were no hold bars, like I did a minute ago, like these guys would not hesitate to just come up out of nowhere and do their thing. And they were big about even going back into the river systems of like China and stuff like that, and working on areas like that. It's quite wild to see, actually. Go ahead, Neptune.
Help me out here. As far as the kind of ships that they used in that time period, I'd love to see
Junks.
Working with junks, I believe it was. Yeah, thank you, Bandit. And as far as those go, from what I understand, they were quite agile in addition to being quick or fast. So is there any information we could possibly pull up on what gave it those distinct advantages? Because that in and of itself, being the vessel that so many of these pirates came on,
they were mostly it's due to them being smaller, I think.
Yes, the junk ships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hold on,
They weren't like your heavy frigates, ship of the line, galleons, brigandines, just your larger English, French vessels. I think it also had to do with their construction too. They didn't use because the ships during the golden age of pirates were like what you would think of when you think of pirate ships.
Mm-hmm.
Their hulls were, 2 feet thick,
Yeah, that's huge. That's colossal.
Exactly, and to turn something like that, not exactly, you're not going to exactly turn on a dime.
No,
well, and that's the thing with them using these smaller ships. They were able to perform their raids, a lot quicker. It's actually something that carried over into modern piracy. They use a lot of smaller type ships so that they can move quicker through the ocean and get in and out on these larger ships a lot quicker. Where we talked about the early Mediterranean pirates in the last episode, they had ships big enough to ram other ships in a sense to knock them down. The Asian pirates weren't so much about, taking out the entire other ship as they were about getting up onto the other ship and basically murdering everybody aboard.
Yeah, and it's like they focused a lot more so than like what you think other piracy eras. They focused a lot on river piracy.
Yes, they were big into river piracy, and have some of the most notorious, pirates of their area in that time. Even a female pirate queen that, I mean, she terrorized everything through there with her red flag feet. We're talking about a lady that had 1,500 ships and more than 80,000 sailors. Wow. Like that in its own is just wild. And I want to get a little bit, into her here in a few minutes. But when you go back, way back to early Asian piracy, you've got the legend of, and I'm going to butcher his name and I apologize, but you've got the legend of Chang Po Sai, who was a Hong Kong pirate, often portrayed as a Robin Hood of sorts, and was the son of a fisherman who was captured by pirates when he was 15 years old. But he taught the pirates that he captured his ways of being a fisherman and stuff, and was eventually adopted into the Chinese pirates themselves. And he had a army of over 20,000 men with several hundred ships. And like, man, he was out there taking treasures. He was out there taking, this, that, and the other. But he was more after going like against the Europeans and stuff like that were invading in their area and taking their stuff and redistributing it to his people. There's not much like physical evidence of him other than drawings like this and stuff. But I mean, that's on its own. That's something on its own. You're talking right around the Han Dynasty time. So what, first, second century of existence that is like documented and stuff. Like this goes back pretty far, and he was a pretty rad dude, if you ask me. Like, I don't know. There's some good stuff out there, man. When it comes to these guys, they're wild.
Well, I think you can almost look at it as paralleling a rags to riches story in a lot of ways, because he goes from being quite literally a prisoner to having an army of his own that he leads, but that army adopted him. They really, truly chose him as their leader, and he led them for, I don't know whether it was a long time or not, but to amass an army or a following that large is quite impressive, especially as a slave, a captive.
So this is like some of the depictions of how the pirates of that time were, just at war with the Han Dynasty. Like that's, of course it's painted or whatever, but this is the kind of stuff that they talked about of how it was. Like these guys did not hesitate when it came to bloodshed.
So at a cursory glance too, just looking at this from a perspective, what we talked about last weekend, the interpersonal relationship between trade, commerce, and piracy. China, for its part, had the largest commerce market in the world at the time. And, even before the days of the Silk Road, China was still then a large producer of opium. So that was
nothing's changed.
No, not really. So just reading through that, you see where that desire to capture those goods comes from, because it's supply and demand.
Well, and a lot of time, when they were raiding these slave ships, that were coming from Europe and stuff like that, they weren't actually going on and killing any of the slaves. They were recruiting them. So they were just building their army by taking people that were already captive and being like, here, you can be free if you want to be a pirate.
Liberate them.
Well, I can think of no more effective way to harness somebody's bitterness and disenchantment with their current circumstances than to be like, well, you could fight, and with all this anger and
turn some angry slaves loose on the Spanish Empire. That'll get it going.
It'll do the trick.
Yeah, well,
and that seemed to be a pretty common thing with Asian piracy in its early stages and stuff like that. They were known for, attacking European ships off the coast of like the Philippines or down there in the Straits and stuff. And the Spanish as well too, like the Spanish and the Portuguese, they were given a really hard time when it came to trying to do anything around there, because Asian pirates were some of the most notorious in their slave trade routes and stuff, because they would be out there, looking for prisoners and bringing prisoners and stuff to places like Australia and things like that. And you had just this band of, some of the pictures out there, actually, they're really funny. They almost look like Mongols. I mean, they're obviously modern pictures, and this one's really bad, but it's just an example, of like kind of what you, I guess, mentally could see. And this is such a bad picture, but it's like, they were very, they were almost Neanderthalic in their ways, like they didn't think about anything other than the violence that they could bring to better themselves. Because at the end of the day, that's what they were attempting to try to do, is live their life and better themselves from the things that they had come from, with many of them coming from slavery and prisoners and other such. I mean, it was a wild time in history. Like, I mean, pirates in general are a wild time in history. But I guess to move forward a little bit, we can jump into this lovely pirate queen that I had made mention of before, because she's probably one of the most badass women of history. Like you just let's see, Zhang Wai Sao, and she was born poor, not far from Hong Kong in 1775, and like she rose to fame and even had things like she in her time frame, she was around with pirates like Captain Kidd, Blackbeard, Henry Morgan, Sir Francis Drake. And
he makes Blackbeard look like an amateur commanding an mercenary army of that size.
dude,
That in of itself is impressive.
I mean, just on its own,
having an armada of 1,500 ships at your command, that's a monumentous feat. And I guess that's worth noting that, I mean, she technically inherited that from her husband who died.
correct.
So to still follow her order, that without question, that makes her an absolute badass.
Yeah, she married, let's see, there were two stories of how Chang one rescued her. One is that the ship dropped him off at a flower boat for a round of pleasure, and he met her and was smitten by her beauty and charmed and offered to marry her. Another story is that a flower boat was raided by Chang's men, who were ordered to abduct her, and she agreed to the marriage proposal. So there's two stories floating around there of how she ended up with him. But nonetheless, when he, like you just said, when he died, she took over. Like when she first came along, he only had 200 ships. And within 3 years, the 3 years before he died, she had raised that just wildly, on top of being a mother to 2 children. This woman's badass. Like, you're out here on a pirate ship being a mom and also, like sailing the seas and being a pirate like that. That's badass. Like, just period.
Mm.
Enjoy your dinner, honey. I'll be back after I raid a Portuguese supply ship.
Really.
And there's actually mystery around how the husband died. Some say that he died at sea because of a typhoon. Some say he fell overboard. And then there's also rumors out there that there was an accident where his wife is actually who killed him because she wanted to take over. And there's even a story out there that when he had landed in what's now modern day Vietnam, that he was surprised, by like an ambush and killed on sight. So there's no real story as to what killed him that led to her becoming the leader, but she did inherit the Red Flag Fleet, which, I mean, that in itself is just amazing. Because you don't think about female pirates, but as we mentioned in the first episode, and we'll continue to mention throughout this thing, there seems to be a lot of female pirates in history. It seems to just be something that they were drawn to, maybe.
I think that's very plausible that it would be a means to make money, to make a living, right? Like we already talked about that. It was seen before it was written off as being an uncouth line of work, that it was very common. So it's fair to assume that history has seen a lot of women pirate commanders.
Absolutely.
And she absolutely makes Blackbeard and anyone in the British Empire or in any fleet commanders in the European navies. You commanding an army that large, that's just fucking awesome.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Common misconception is that Blackbeard was this amazing pirate commander that couldn't be reckoned with, and the reality was he was very feared due to his stature. He was reports range from saying he was 6 feet tall to 6'6". At any rate, he was very tall for the time period. 6 feet tall was still a giant back then. He had a very thick, full black beard, obviously, given his nickname. But in addition, he was educated. He was a very educated man, and that really intimidated a lot of his opponents. But he did not have the charisma.
Sometimes I
actually
think,
find that with a lot of pirates, believe it or not. They weren't these like they were. A lot of them were actually highly educated, though. Some of them were even former naval officers.
Yes.
Blackbeard himself served Queen Anne.
These guys aren't
in the British Navy. But
you know, these guys
yeah.
aren't your typical like. They knew what they were doing.
So
they knew what they were
and
doing.
yeah, and I think to that,
know?
I think to that end, I think one thing that's remained true is what we know of pirates in any cursory glances is based in reputation. Like, and I think that's how a lot of them become feared, is that word of mouth, and that's where I think a lot of legends begin.
Well, getting into the era of the Ming Dynasty, a lot of your pirates of that time were ex like Navy for like the Japanese or whatever, mainly in that area. And then, but they were good about recruiting from the lower classes of society, including, you know, just flat out poor people, fishermen, people that were, you know, they were fleeing from obligatory labor, like state buildings and stuff like that. And, you know, it was men and women, and a lot of them would be fleeing from taxation and stuff like that. And
There's freedom in that.
yeah. And so they were willingly joining local pirate bands so that they could, you know, give themselves a better life, a more closer life to freedom. Whether, you know, sure, they were engaging in improv, you know, smuggling and or illegal trade, but like legal and right, you know, this is just something we cover a lot on our show here, but legal and right are two different things. You know, when you really get into the justs of this, they were going after mostly groups of European and, you know, even Asian that were in these trade worlds, trading not only spices and goods, but, you know, a lot of slavery. Like it seems that especially in the Japanese pirate routes during some of this time and stuff, which I'll pull a map up of it. They were out there like just getting rid of slaves in that area, like getting rid of slave trade in this area. And a lot of them were recruiting these so-called slaves from this traded area. And the thing I want to make mention of is this is, you know, if you're watching, if you're not, come and check this out. But this is like their routes that they were known to be hiding in. And all of these little rivers right here are also areas that they were known to come back into and go ham, like right there on the coast without even having to be in the ocean. So that in itself is pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of amphibious warfare that goes into that, and you have to have foot soldiers willing to make that fight on land when it gets up close and personal like that. If you're not out in the open sea,
completely. You know, the Southeast Asian time of piracies in itself really set the bar, I think, for leading into like the golden age of pirates and stuff. Because, you know, you had made mention a minute ago about Blackbeard being a former military for Queen Anne, and even though they kind of stole the story to give it to Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the Caribbean's like movies and stuff, there is some truth to Blackbeard walking away from the work with Queen Anne because he didn't want to have part in the slave trade. Which, when you start getting into these Asian pirates, you see that they were trying to also stop slave trades. Like that was their biggest thing, I think, was rescuing people that have been either imprisoned or considered slaves by the state at the time, or, you know, the time that, or the area that they came from.
To that end, that doesn't make sense why Xing Shi had gone to war with the incumbent dynasty at the time. She waged full-scale war against them.
She did. They went ham. And I mean, when you've got an army of 80,000 people and that many ships floating around out there, who's going to stop it?
I think it's important to note that not only did she have an army of 80,000 and that many ships as well, but because they're breaking up these slave trades, without a doubt, unequivocally, the most valuable commodity in the world at that time period was manpower. It arguably still is. And to be able to take away manpower from your opponents while also boasting such incredible manpower on your own end was a remarkable feat. I mean, just a marvel to behold. Really.
Denial of resources that's a battle tactic. Bandit knows something about that.
Mm-hmm.
Denial of resources is one of the key tiers of warfare.
So here's an interesting little fact that a lot of people probably don't even know. There was a tribe of Asian pirates known as the Bugis tribe, Bugis. And if you've ever wondered where the name Boogeyman came from, well, it purportedly originates from the Bugis tribe, a tribe of South Ceylonese Indonesia pirates. The Bugis people were infamous pirates who, during the colonial times, often pillaged English and Dutch trading ships from the British and East India Company. And they were known for traveling as far as Australia and New Guinea just to trade. And some were even working as mercenaries, underneath the Dutch and European armies that they didn't realize. But the expression "the boogeyman is coming to get you" is believed to have arisen from the deeply rooted fear that European mariners from centuries past had the boogeymen, B-U-G-I. And even today, the Bugis people are still associated with piracy attacks on land and sea around Indonesia. So that's pretty friggin' interesting, that a whole entire tribe of Asian pirates create, or why people are worried about a boogeyman.
That's psychological warfare. And if you notice, I think anything in naval history, I don't think they have the most I'm trying to figure out the word I want to use. They have the most superstitions attached to them.
Yes.
Anything naval history, even into it, that it even makes its way into modern day navies. I have never met more superstitious people than anybody in the Navy. The military is very superstitious. They have omens, but the Navy, they have the most. And this is just part of it. And I think they have better stories to tell, especially years ago. Anybody who's been to sea, and I guess that goes with even anybody who goes to sea, even just in trade, they have the sea holds, stories. It really does, man.
The sea holds terrors unknown. That's the reality. It's so sprawling, and we don't know anything about the floor of the ocean. It's this terrifying.
We know more about space
So
than we know about our own ocean.
So I can kind of speak to that, but on the story of, on being superstitious, the most haunting thing in the world really is being on the open sea at night.
Yes.
You are pitch black.
Yeah.
And if you ever from the mast or on the flight deck, wherever you're looking, if you're looking out over the open ocean, that story that you see mirages in the desert if you walk long enough from the matter of dehydration. You start to think you see things being out on the open ocean at night. And you're almost doing a double or a triple take because you thought you saw something. You thought you saw another ship in the shipping lane. You try to hail and there's nothing there. You go up to investigate what you thought you saw, where you thought you saw it, and there's nothing actually there. So I think there's some supernatural that goes into that, especially men who've served in the Pacific definitely have more stories than those who've served with the Atlantic fleets and such.
Where do you think they get these? Let's even look at it from Pirates of the Caribbean look. Where do you think they get all those stories? Stories have to have some element of truth to them.
Oh, absolutely.
There has to be some element of truth.
So,
Because like I've said numerous times on this podcast, you can't just miraculously pull something like out of thin air. You know what I mean?
A story
you can't
didn't
pull a
start
story
from
out of
nothing.
thin air without having been,
Amen.
whether that some of that is passed on by word of mouth or you've seen it with your own eyes.
well, and rarely did pirates claim the label of piracy themselves. A lot of times this goes back to people like Europeans and the Dutch and stuff like that, considering these people that are out there not following their military orders and stuff like that as enemies of their groups. And a lot of these pirate stories, this is why there's not so much written down about piracy as there really is, because a lot of these pirate stories were passed through word of mouth. You had like with her, for example, she had those two children, so she passed stories down of their father to her and stuff like that, and they probably told stories of her and so on throughout the centuries, because when you get into like Asian piracy, you see that they've got hatches. You've got stuff during like the Ming Dynasty and that go way back, and then you don't see them pop back up really again until like the 15th, 16th century, and then you don't see them pop up again until like towards the end of the Golden Age and stuff like that. And even into today, there still is a big world of not only Somali pirates, but Japanese pirates are a true problem even still into this day. And a lot of the history, a lot of the myths, a lot of the stories and stuff either get lost to translation or get objectified and turned into something that they weren't and stuff like that. Like the writers of current history have done a good job turning piracy into something that's bad. When you really get into the depths of it, though, you see it as people that were just struggling to deal with their current state at the time or their taxes and stuff like that. And they were like, fuck this. We're just going to do ourselves. We don't need you guys. And I mean, shit, there's a lot of proof that show that these guys did quite well for themselves, even though they didn't have the abilities to, be a part of a lot of these other empires that were going on in Asia and Dutch and English and stuff like that. So,
and let's not forget
it's almost like they created their own state. You know what I'm saying? But it was on a boat.
There's been a huge resurgence in modern day piracy in the Southeast Asian waters. Huge resurgence. We're getting sailors, soldiers, fishermen, and just common civilians are taking to sea in Southeast Asia.
I mean, I threaten all the time to just get myself a big ass boat and take it to sea. So,
as long as you take me with you,
you got it.
There's a culture around it for sure.
Because it is.
There's so much
culture has to do with freedom. It really does. It has to do with freedom. People get fed up with paying taxes on taxes on taxes on taxes on taxes, getting robbed by inflation, having to have permits to do everything, the government shutting down their businesses, the government doing this, and they get fed up with it to a point where they're like, all right, I know a buddy who's got a boat. We're going to go do this.
Free men and women don't ask permission.
Yeah. And
there's definitely
it has to do with freedom.
Yeah. And there's definitely a culture around it. And, to people getting into that too, there's, from the stories you read, it's almost folklore, but it goes into a lot of modern Navy culture, which it's kind of its own clique. It's a matter of belonging, and sailors bond in a way that I don't think a lot of other people can ever understand or appreciate unless they're amongst their own. And there's definitely a camaraderie there. So sailors, men bonding together like that, that's definitely a mark of freedom.
As wild as this sounds, actually, I guess on the same thing, people Pirates have always been known for things like sea shanties, and everybody puts the sea shanty into their brain with like the Jolly Roger flag and the golden age of pirates. But it seems that the origins for the sea shanty came from a lot of these Asian pirates raiding slave ships, because a lot of these slaves on these ships were singing upon being boarded and stuff like that, and they brought that over with them when they became pirates and stuff. And the singing of these sea shanties that they were doing were also used as a form of intimidation, because you'd be out in the middle of the ocean, like you're talking, in the middle of the night, everything's dead quiet, but then all of a sudden you hear singing, and it would be these pirates, like as a warning, an ominous warning, singing as they're coming to get ready to board your ship. So that, I mean, that's more of that head game stuff, if you really think about it. Because of, Neptune, you mentioned out there in the middle of the ocean, late at night, and mirages and stuff like that, and seeing things. Well, how uneasy would you be in a dark area, all of a sudden hearing singing coming from the middle of the ocean like that?
There is also a terrifying urban legend that you almost hear it the moment you tell a sailor that you saw a siren. It's like their ears kind of just jump up, because they're like, really? Yeah. The allure of beautiful women singing that turns out to be a sailor's untimely death is definitely as old as pirate culture.
Well,
sure.
I mean, think about that. That has to do in the world of mermaids. The mermaid would sing to you, and the pirate would go and find it and come to their death. So, was it actually mermaids, or was it some of these or was it these pirates? You know what I'm saying? Singing over here into the dark, and then they go chasing after that beautiful sound that they hear, and the next thing you know, fucking, you're boarded by a couple hundred dudes that are out there just here to rob you and kill you. Like, I mean, it's interesting to think that those two stories kind of collide.
Yeah, there's definitely some basis in reality there. It's very, especially when you don't have a screen of protection, traveling at sea, you're very vulnerable. So you got to keep your head on a swivel. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, when you're into something like piracy to begin with, you've got to keep your head on a swivel, because you basically painted a target on the back of your head for others to, judge you if you're not based.
Yes, because if people following you with the intention of detaining you, arresting you, isn't enough, you also have to reckon with other pirates that might just want to steal your loot.
Yes,
100%.
Yes, because you've got this one group that had that giant fleet of 1,500 ships in the Asian piracy era, but think about that. That's the famous one. That's the one that a lot of them knew. What about the ones that were once-offs, or ones that were not a part of that group? They were a part of a rival group that were out there trying to rob them and stuff like that. There's the fact that you have so many different groups of pirates from the Mediterranean, the Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, and stuff like that, and all traveling amongst themselves. They're bound to run across each other, and there's bound to be turf wars, in a sense.
Yep.
Of which pirates area, which pirates ocean you're in.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, a turf war, because it's like, it's like going aground in a gang war on land, right? Like, you've carved out this piece of land and you say that it's yours. Much like on the water, you could say, okay, we claim dominion over, the Adriatic Sea, in the Mediterranean, something like that. South China Sea, Vietnamese pirates, which, to Bandit's point, which is starting to crop up again in Southeast Asia. Very much they want to protect their own investment, and obviously also not get caught.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, when most people's first thought of piracy is like illegal activities, but it's more closely related to the world of commerce than it is anything else, because they were out here trading and smuggling, and they relied on merchants and stuff to outfit their ships and sell their plunder and stuff like that. So I mean, it really is, like you made mention earlier, one of the oldest things out there, kind
Yeah.
of like prostitution.
The logistics of the barter system are fascinating to me because it goes beyond currency, like
Yes.
oftentimes through history, and I think it's going to be true again at some point, is the world will rely on a barter system to some degree, whether we have currency or not. And bartering your goods or services is going to be something that carries substantial weight. It could be booze, it could be food supplies, food rations, raw materials for manufacturing and production. Those things matter. And whether you're on the open sea for 6-7 months out of the year, or you're just going out to make a quick dollar, still having something of value to bring home is that's important.
It really is, what I mean? And you've got different East Asian and Southeast Asian and stuff like that groups that are going on throughout there. Like, I'm not even going to try to butcher all their names, but we're talking prevalent in not only like the first and second centuries, but having major prevalence in like the 9th century and up to like the 15th and 16th century. Like these guys, especially these Asian pirates, man, it seems that when life gets tough in Asia, like you mentioned a few minutes ago, going back to it now, these guys do not hesitate to go get on a ship and just do what they do. And I mean, personally, I find it, just completely alluring and just amazing, because it's just like.
So here's something interesting. I actually just plucked this out of a Time article. I'm going to put it in the chat for you. Between the years 1995 to 2013, so only 9 years removed from the last year that they recorded anything on this, Southeast Asia represented 41% of piracy trade or piracy attacks, as reported by this article here. So I think that represents a substantial figure in Bandit to what you mentioned, that it's come back in a big way, or that it never really went away at all, really.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's another map on this one.
And yeah, this is
that's
yeah.
Whew.
So it's almost double the Gulf of Aden, as it mentions Somalia here. That was just 28%, and West African coast of 18%. So that's So Southeast Asia for sure is.
It looks like Singapore-related region is just a hotbed for all of that, which makes sense because they are essentially just a region of massive commerce. But if you look at the South China Sea and the Gulf of Thailand geographically, those are massive trade regions where they're transporting a ton of product in general. And you'd have to be blind not to see that happening in your own waters. So I think what you're getting is a lot of people that, like we've stated, are intelligent people, but have been pushed to the brink and basically go, this is how I'm going to get my freedom. This is how I'm going to get mine.
I've had a lot of friends in my lifetime that have sold it all here in America and up and moved to the Philippines. And I mean, you hear about that quite a bit, especially in like the boomer generation and stuff. But like, the thing about it is that a great example is my father-in-law lives in like one of the main islands of the Philippines, and it's a little more modern. They're still lost in time a little bit. But one of my best friends that spent time in the military and stuff like that, his name's Don. He sold it all and ended up on a tiny little island with a population of less than 3,000. living out there in this island in the Philippines. And it's one of many, like there's many tiny islands in like the Philippines areas and Indonesia and all the South Asian Sea. And a lot of these tiny uncharted islands absolutely house pirates. Like, my buddy Don, I have pretty frequent contact with him, and he's told me in the past that, yeah, you can be sitting on your porch and you'll see a pirate ship go by. Like they're not out here messing with us poor folks, but they're definitely looking for other ships to board and raid, and that's interesting, that they know, a lot of them know what to pass by, and a lot of them, they're focused on basically stealing from the rich and trying to either give back to themselves, or even in times coming back to their little home islands like that and celebrating their island with their people. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these little islands were populated strictly because of pirates, if you really think about it. So it's quite amazing to see how much influence across the world piracy has had since its beginnings. I don't think you would have near the military navy that we have today if it wasn't for threats of piracy, or people that were pirates that, maybe evolved out of the piracy and more into that, and vice versa. They a lot of the maritime type things were put into place due to piracy, because people were just out there living it up however they felt necessary to enjoy their lives and such.
Agreed.
Oh, but it's amazing to see that the Asian culture itself is such a hotbed for piracy. Like, a lot of people, when you think Asian culture, especially modern days, you think, and I know this sounds terrible, but you think computer chips, really good at math, stuff like that. But yet deep in their DNA, these guys have been sea people for probably longer than even some of the earlier stuff that we had mentioned. Because when you get into Asian history, you see Asian history makes written English history look like a small blip on the radar. Because Asian history, Chinese history, Ming Dynasty, all of them kind of things, they go way back. And they were dealing with pirates before the white man was even trying to travel anywhere.
Commissioned warfare or irregular warfare such as piracy. East Asian countries, they had some of the earliest invention in the improvement of warfare tactics, especially on open water. We often give credit to the Marine Corps for kind of developing what we consider the standard today of amphibious assault, but that really originated in Southeast Asia. That originated with a lot, as you mentioned from that map that you brought up earlier, having men willing to go to ground and have a standing force of men, of sailors or otherwise mercenaries, whatever they are, that are willing to go to ground and on land for you. That's amphibious assault. That is a Marine. The word itself is French, I think, for sea, for water, and that's where they got their name, from the water or from the sea. That's where Marines in modern times of all colors get their name. So they had to have that means of both defense and offense to protect themselves.
And you can actually thank the Asian pirates for like modern cannons and stuff like that. They were some of the first to use gunpowder.
Yes. Tang Dynasty, 9th century China, was the invention of gunpowder.
And they were using it on ships at that point.
Legit. That's no joke. That's modern warfare developed.
And so think about it, with their little junk ships that they had. If you were manned with a cannon, there was no need to ram another ship to sink it. You just take a few shots, because who else has gunpowder?
Yeah, we talked about naval rams last weekend, Bandit. Remember, we talked about that and talked about the ability to get up close and personal with a ship, right?
And
but that presents
most of the time prior to, I think what most people think of piracy, it was up close and personal. It was up close, dirty, and brutal.
Yep.
Yeah,
But,
your goal was either to board the ship or sink the ship.
Yeah, and like I said before, I mean, if you want to make top-notch pirate movies, they should make it prior to the Golden Age. They really should. They really should. If they want to make a good one, I think they should explore those opportunities.
I would totally watch that.
Most of the time, it's been like documentaries, but I mean, they really haven't like made a big budget like pirate flick of anything prior to the Golden Age.
Yeah, and I mean, we almost romanticize the Golden Age of piracy because of media, because of
Well, it was the
years of Pirates of the Caribbean,
it was the
right?
final like big era of piracy. When the Golden Age was over, piracy kind of just faded away. And so that's probably why it's romanticized.
I agree.
After that,
there was nothing. Right. And one fault for that, and I mean, it's a great book. If you've never read it, Treasure Island is a great book. But I fault Robert Louis Stevenson to a point, because that book has been so heavily lifted. Oh, I totally want to watch this.
I believe it's in Asian, but it's supposed to be taking place.
I'd rather watch it in its native tongue.
Yeah,
just to appreciate the art.
Subtitles.
Yeah, I'll totally watch something with subtitles, bro. That shit don't bother me at all. I've been watching anime for years.
So, but we have in the West, right? We don't get a whole lot of good reading on stuff that occurs outside of the West or European culture in a general sense. So Treasure Island, for all its inspiration of 20th century fiction, of Pirates of the Caribbean, of Secret of Monkey Island, of anything you can imagine, from the cartoon level, from Robin Hood, Peter Pan, Captain Hook, down Pirates of the Caribbean to now, we use that as a guideline of the subject matter that we read. And when's the last time that you could think of, and this is kind of just a rhetorical question, have you read a book about Asian piracy, right? In the sense of lore, like reading material in school or whatever.
This movie looks awesome, by the way.
Yes, it does. I totally am going to watch that.
Me too.
But yeah, it's just food for thought. I don't think we've had enough exposure to that influence that it had on culture, and focusing so hard on the Golden Age of piracy is because of books like Treasure Island. Not saying that it's a bad book. It's a great book. Oh,
hey, that one I just showed you is actually a sequel. There is 2 Asian pirate movies there that are called The Pirates. There's a prequel to that one, which hangs out in the South Korean period of adventure. So we're talking about the same time frame that we're currently talking about, and there's 2 of these movies. So I'm definitely going to be looking into it, and I totally recommend anybody else to look into it, because from what I'm sitting here reading is that they're kind of covering a lot of what happened in the Southeast Asian Sea, following female pirates, because again, this seems to be a common trend, especially, not only worldwide, but most definitely over here in Asia, that there were multiple female pirate queens or leaders or captains or whatever you want to call them. And that's just, there's something to be said about that. Like, don't get me wrong. I make jokes, and I don't mean any harm when I make jokes, but like, think about a woman ruler as a pirate. She gets a little moody one day, she might be sinking a ship. It's just, it's interesting to see just all of this. And I really am looking forward. I'm going to check out those movies, because some of those stills I was just showing, if you were paying attention on the stills and you're watching, they look like they've done a really good job at taking some of these old photos that I've found and bringing them to life. Like the you're looking at, like, kind of dirty people. They didn't bathe like we do and stuff like that. It was an old time. So there would be days, months even, that they were probably on a ship, just sailing around in these areas looking for other places to either take down, or get their next booty haul, or whatever you want to call it and stuff. And on top of that, the mention, like I did a few minutes ago, of all of these little interlying islands throughout everywhere. Even in the modern golden age of pirates and stuff like that, even in modern age pirates, they seem to be on little island type areas. So, like over here in the Caribbean and over near Somalia, and in that photo we were showing earlier, between like the Gulf of Thailand and Indonesia and everything, a lot of these little outlying islands to this day could still be slam full of pirates. And it's amazing to think that there's these little subcultures of people that are just locked away from the rest of the world doing their thing, And not to mention, thinking about all of the ships that were like sunk. You guys keep making mention of how we know jack shit about our oceans, which we don't. You can look that up yourself. But think about all of the lost treasures and stuff, especially in like this Asian piracy time, from all the ships they were sinking with cannons, because they were the first persons using cannons and such. Like, there's the amount of treasures that are just at the bottom of the sea is just, I'd be down. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd be down. Let's go get some scuba gear, guys. We can do Unconstitutional Awakening, the search for treasure.
That one, it brings up a good point, because there's lots of, it's almost become folklore at this point, but through Asia, and especially up through all the way north into the north through like the Black Sea, and across eastern Europe and Eurasia by and large, you've got many a story about lost treasures lost to the deep. And I also put credence into not just what we call the Bermuda Triangle, which is supposed to be cursed, if you believe the rumors, that there are many other places around the globe that are indeed cursed, and ships go off and you just never hear from them again.
Well, I mean, and not just that, like in a lot of these times, the punishment for piracy was hanging. So, if you didn't get away, if you did get caught, you were just hung. Like, they didn't hesitate. They didn't even trial you. You were guilty of piracy, and you were hung. So this goes into losing a lot of these stories and stuff like that, because they weren't documented. They were just told by word of mouth. There's probably millions of pirate stories that no man will ever actually hear, because the story died at sea with those pirates.
Yeah, with the captain of the ship, his log went down with the ship. You're never going to see it again.
Yeah, it's at the bottom of the ocean, either eaten away, or if it was lucky enough to be preserved in some way. Like, we're talking the ocean, man. Like, the bottom of the ocean isn't just a quick hop, skip, and a jump away. It takes proper equipment and stuff to get down that far. That's why there's so many areas that are still untouched.
Yeah, what is it? The ocean covers 85% of the planet, and we've only explored like 10% of the ocean itself. So there's so much to be. It leaves a lot to be desired, for sure.
It does, and you guys got to think that these guys. Yeah, you're right. There's 85% of the world is covered in ocean, and less than 10% has been explored. And some of that's due to like equipment. Like when you get to a certain pressure, just like with a plane, things will get crushed down in that pressure down low into the ocean and stuff like that.
And that's a testament to just to live on the ocean. Sorry, Bandit, go ahead, man.
No. I was just about to say I watched a documentary about they're about to go back to the Marianas Trench.
Yeah.
And not just that, but like the unexplored oceans. How much treasure is at the bottom of the ocean that we'll never see because of the depths and areas to which it rests? Think about like the vastness of just like the Pacific. You're talking about like the Bermuda Triangle, like the Atlantic. Think about there is a picture that presents like the haunting size of the Pacific Ocean, where they rotated the globe in such a way that the entirety of like the Pacific Ocean covered like one side of the globe. Like there was no land available.
If you spin a globe, you'll see a few islands. You'll see a few islands.
Yeah, the most isolated place.
Some Samoa, and some of the other islands like Marshall's Islands and things. But yeah, it's a void, and it's an absolute void.
And just to like think of during those eras of like we don't know like as far as like navigation devices that they used or how they navigated before they had before they had any types of modern compasses that we know of.
We would use so
rudimentary objects to navigate by the stars, maybe.
And you had a theoretical to keep track of time by a sundial. And those would be installed on ships to help keep track of time for the crews. But yeah, absolutely. No, I mean it was very difficult for them to navigate.
The Asian piracy era in the Pacific, or even just like I don't even think we touched much on the river piracy. And how vast it was in all of Southeast Asia. But just to think of being out in the Pacific Ocean, you have no understanding of how vast it is, and just sailing for days and days and days and days and days and seeing no land. You know?
I mean, I've been on like charter fishing boats in the Pacific Ocean, like holy hell.
And
I have, and it blows your mind. And I was just off the coast of Florida, out in the Atlantic and the Gulf side, and it really blows you away. You can look at pictures all day. You really can. You can look at pictures all day. You can watch videos all day, but until you've been out there and seen, felt it.
Yeah, and there's something else to say about the resolve of pirates, and this was kind of the thought I wanted to close the loop on, and I think this will probably be my last thought for this episode. But it's a testament to the resiliency of pirates to be able to be out at sea for that long, and then those who adopt that way of life and live there year round, because there's good solid evidence to support that being on the open sea for extended periods of time can adversely affect your mental health. And we see a lot of evidence of pirates developing abject paranoia. Your mental health and having the morale, keeping the morale up for your crew, keeping your men and women's their mental health, keeping that in check to be able to navigate the high seas and still do your duty. That's a testament to how strong-willed pirates are throughout history, I think.
Absolutely. And to touch back on what Bandit had said just a minute ago about the about river pirates, when you do get to searching for that, now I'll share a link that I got too, that I was just sharing on screen a minute ago. The China area and Southeast Asia along the Mekong River and the Yangtze River are even to this day slam full of river pirates. Like it was a big thing for merchant ships during the olden days going up and down these rivers in Asia, that they were getting hit by pirates that were not only on boats on these rivers but also just off land. There's a region known as the Golden Triangle, which had like tons of illegal trafficking of heroin and slaves and stuff like that. And that was one of the biggest spots where Asian pirates have, even to this day, continued to.
Today. The Golden Triangle is probably the single most violent region in the entire world because of the opium trade, because of its proximity to the Silk Road and to the river accesses that would get them on the open seas. Golden Triangle is absolutely one of the most dangerous places on Earth. No question.
And I guess to give everybody a visual of where the Golden Triangle is, I'll pull that up real quick because I do have a visual of it. But like this is this area right here, and you got to understand, like, these rivers come running in and out of the ocean right in this area. So all up in here, and even going into areas of what is modern day Russia and stuff like that, these areas are connected by river. So you've got not only the threat of Asian pirates coming from the southeast and stuff, but you get back into having the Russian and Viking pirates coming down from the Russian area down those rivers. So, I mean, I could imagine that even on some of these rivers in that Golden Triangle area, there is a plethora of sunken ships and treasure at the bottom of these rivers that were due to piracy.
So, no question.
So, and I think this has been a great little cover of a bunch of the minor things that happened over there in the Asian area and stuff like this. And believe it or not, the Asian piracy timeline leads right into the golden age of pirates, because people like that pirate queen we discussed and stuff like that, she had a reign through the time of Blackbeard. So, you've got to figure that these people definitely came across each other and probably knew of one another, through legend, through word of mouth, through things like that on their different sea trade routes. These people always are like, oh, well, they didn't discover this until Europeans sailed there. And it's just like, bro, I guarantee you these pirates have been traveling in and out of places like America, South America, and stuff like that long before the Spanish invaded or the Europeans tried to colonize. These pirates were probably already living lives in these areas. I think it would explain things a lot more when you start finding things that came from the Americas, like corn, for example, ending up in Africa. Well, I bet you some pirates had a way to trade that. They come across the corn when they were visiting South America and Central America, and when they brought it back to places like Africa and Southeast Asia, it was probably a great trade tool because they had never seen such a thing before. So, people don't attest the genius, the pure genius, I believe, that is in the mind of a pirate, because they didn't have the things just given to them like fleets of European Navy or Japanese Navy and stuff like that. They earned it their own way, whether it be through thievery, whether it be through piracy, whether it be through just seeing a fucking vacant boat and taking the bitch. You know what I mean? Like they had their own ways of coming up and using their brain to get around on all this stuff. Because you can't sit here and tell me that a pirate was an idiot. You know what I mean? Like, sure, they might have had crew members that were completely subpar and ridiculous, but like, for the most part, you've got people that are having to use their brain on the fly to keep themselves from drowning.
And it's not just that. You had a full-time cook. You had some sort of doctor. You had a carpenter, a couple of carpenters.
Yep.
Well, in fact, that's one of those things that probably a lot of people were cross-trained. And carpentry, blacksmiths. Yep. You had to have somebody that sewed for the sails. You had to have somebody that was good with rig. They all had to be good rigging a ship, tying knots.
and the captain's lifeline. Don't forget, captain's lifeline is a yeoman. You have to have a yeoman, a good communications officer on board your vessel to be able to get word out and think almost lockstep with the captain, right? The yeoman is basically first officer on the deck. Besides an XO in modern times today, a pirate captain has to have that. If they don't have it,
and that went for sailing,
everything breaks down.
That went for sailing across the board, though. I mean,
for real.
Merchants, regular naval vessels, and pirates. I mean, you had to be cross-trained in so many different things. You weren't just a deckhand. You also had to know carpentry. You might have to jump in and fill the blacksmith's spot. You had to know how to tie knots, rigging, sails, navigation. You had to know these things. You might even be thrown on a gun crew.
Yeah.
And to think that it wasn't about like you weren't just standing around being a pirate, man. Daily life was
a 24/7 job by far.
Daily
100%.
life. That's why that's why the mortality rate was, if you lived to be your early 40s, you were an old salty dog.
Yeah, what was the average life expectancy for a pirate, Jimmy? Can you check this out? I think it was 38.
I believe so. I'll double check though.
Yeah. Was it 20s? I thought it might have been a little higher. Okay, if I'm wrong, I'll concede, but I thought it was something in the mid 30s. But yeah, I might be wrong.
But if you reach to your 40s,
oh yeah, no,
okay. This is hilarious. Life expectancy for men pressed into service, as a pirate, 2 years.
So if they got on board from the time they were 19 or 20 years old,
you were going to be killed, or you just died at sea from unknown ailments, or just so broken that you died.
And it was either many times crews were mutinied against. Ugh. They just surrendered when they were threatened by other pirates.
Where's disease fall on that list?
Disease falls on this list. And, of course, if they were ever captured, they were hung for crimes of mutiny and such, being a pirate like that.
But those 2 years, you might have worked your ass off.
Oh yeah, and you
lived.
Absolutely,
and you saw places that
you were more alive.
We take advantage of being able to get online or get on our phone and just view the world. Like, then they saw things that nobody had ever seen before. They might have heard about it, but they saw it firsthand.
It really is, yeah.
So in those 2 years, they lived, and
Well, I got this little tidbit of information that goes along with this. It says that the life for a pirate was hard, but nothing that they wouldn't expect. There were pirate politics that were quite progressive for the time, and pirates even elected their captains and such. There was a form of democracy already in the world of piracy, along with the pirate code, like we had made mention before, that was kind of an unwritten code, that these guys did follow. There was a level of respect from one group of pirates to another. Don't get me wrong.
Because you have to have trust in your chain of command. And this is especially true on the open waters. If your chain of command breaks down, you will have mutiny. It will fall apart.
Sure.
That's inevitable. So yeah, that's awesome to see that they implemented whatever form of democracy that is, representative of the crew, to be able to trust their captain, because the captain is responsible for their lives, right? Their lives 100%. Are in his hands.
100%.
It's funny we're talking Asian piracy. It's funny how you notice the similarities in life and rules. really. I mean, when you look across piracy from its earliest documented sources to the Golden Age, you really notice a similarity in rules, elected officials, ship life, and what they were about. You really notice a similarity. So that makes you think.
It really does. I mean, there's just so much there, and there's
See,
still so much more to come.
Neptune's got it going, man. It's like you would fit right in drinking bourbon at 11:50 in the afternoon. You would fit right in, man. Rum would go right with.
Excuse me, Bandit. It's 11:50 in the before noon.
That's actually
Yeah.
It is actually Sailor. It is actually Sailor Jerry's. So it is actually.
Hey, they've got a dark version of Sailor Jerry's that is pretty good.
I might have to give that a try.
My girl just finished a bottle of plantation pineapple rum that was fantastic.
Well, if you want a good pirate story from Jim Bob here,
Man,
the last time I got my hands on a bottle of Sailor Jerry, I woke up on the other side of a lake that I used to live on that had like a little mountain in the middle of it.
In truth be told, it is Sailor Jerry's is good, but there's much better out there. I'm not going to spout off names because we're not sponsored.
That's right.
Cool though, but we're not sponsored by any rum. So I'm not going to give out.
Yeah, the one, my particular favorite, and I'll just leave its name out, is a dark spiced rum, and it's got a giant squid on the front of that bottle.
I know what you're talking about.
I think it requires a lot of self-loathing to drink any sort of liquor that has a pirate on the bottle. I really like this, and I think it directly correlates with your hatred towards other people as well. I think they're relative to each other, they're equal, but there's a lot of hatred going on there.
But why is rum associated with piracy though?
Well, actually, I do know this because as our resident culinarian, this is the kind of stuff that I know. So rum was commonly used as an ingredient in grog. I'm sure all of you guys have heard of grog. Grog was a mixture of water, usually some sort of citrus juice or citrus itself just squeezed and then thrown in a barrel for scurvy, and also for its medicinal and purifying properties. Many times boiled herbs, or they would boil this water as an additional measure to purify it, because your water is being stored in a barrel that's kind of shitty on the sea.
And I have no way of proving this. This is one of just a handful of stories around rum itself, but supposedly it had been found on accident.
That's
but through the fermentation process, and they just called it rum. And I don't remember where it got its name, but because it was ship
prevalent
it became associated with sailors, with
tropical
pirates
areas. So that makes sense. Also, maybe they went to store sugarcane, and the liquid produced became known as rum. But to think that a resident culinarian knows why it's rum.
There are a lot of stories, but there's
a
lot of stories there.
What they would do is they would mix the rum. They would try to purify this water however they could. Through many steps, they would boil it with the herbs in it for their medicinal properties. Then they would add their citrus, usually lemon or lime, and then they would add in rum. So you have 3 different steps of trying to purify this water, because water, as we all know, is a life-sustaining element. You need it, and especially when you're on the sea, when you're surrounded by this humidity, the constant sun beating down on you, you need it. Now, obviously, when they're transporting sugarcane, like you guys were talking about, you're in a humid area with lots of sun, and really there's no reprieve. You can put it below deck, but at the end of the day, there's no air conditioning. You got to do what you got to do. And I'm almost 1,000% certain that if it wasn't an accident on an island where there was sugarcane being stored, it was an accident on a ship where rum came to be, and a nice monosyllabic word was a good way of describing what you just discovered.
And there, actually, that just brings me to an interesting thing. Since you mentioned grog, Ox, is that there is a mixologist somewhere on your side of the country that developed a cocktail called grog, which is brown sugar, lime juice, and spiced rum, and supposedly it's good. I'll defer to anyone willing to try that, but it's not for me.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, guys, I think this has been an excellent part 2 to our Sea of Thieves docuseries. And so, before I close out, as I normally do, I'm going to go around the table. Ox, you got anything you want to throw in before we close out for the day?
I think I'm good. I think we covered a lot of cool stuff in this episode. And remember, guys, apparently, if you want 2 years of freedom, piracy is the way to go. So, yeah.
Neptune, what you got for me?
Life not lived to the fullest is a life not worth living.
That's right. That's right. Bandit, what you got for me, buddy?
I'm good, man. It's good. I think we start Golden Age next.
We do. The next part of this is going to be jumping into the Golden Age of Pirates, which is going to go on for a couple episodes. There's so much for us to cover.
And this one I might actually be able to contribute to more meaningfully, since Asian piracy was a new concept for me. So thanks for letting me jump in and help where I could on this.
Of course. No, that's what this is about. I'm just trying to get out here and educate some people on some stuff. That's just we've done a couple docuseries already. Went from going into nuclear stuff to the history of DARPA to the history of aliens and stuff like that. And I just felt it was necessary for us to cover the history of pirates, seeing as we're all pirates anyway. So, but of course, you guys know I have to end it on something good. So, why did the pirate go on vacation? He needed a little arg and arg. You guys have a great night. Thank you.